Okay, dang, that was sick. I am not over that last song. Have to I could feel that in my bones. That was amazing. All right, here's what I want to start with tonight, guys. I want to ask you one of my favorite get to know you questions. If you have been around me, I've probably asked you this question before. I love it. I think it's so insightful. But here's my question, okay? What's your favorite story of all time? Maybe I've asked you that, right? But think about it. What's your favorite story? It could be a book, it could be a movie, a TV series. I don't care what it is. But what is your favorite story ever? And then usually when I ask that, I follow up with the question of why? Why is that your favorite? What do you love so much about that story? What draws you in with that story? There's so many great stories. Maybe I'm just a nerd, but I just think there's so many epic stories out there. So maybe it'd be kind of hard for you to choose. You're I don't know, on the spot, how could I make that decision? And I get that. But when it comes to box office sales, let's go with that for a minute. When it comes to box office sales, there is one clear winner. At least in terms of movies, the greatest story that has ever hit the theaters was Avatar, which was released in 2009, and it was this story of a fictional world called Pandora, right? And if you've seen the movie, you know, I think a lot of us have seen it. The story that they create in that movie, it's kind of beautiful. It's full of color, and there's all this peaceful glow stuff happening. The people, the Na'vi people, I think on Pandora, they live in harmony. And they're constantly doing things. They're exploring new terrain, new wildlife. And the whole movie, it just kind of draws you into a world that's almost like a dreamland. Compared to Earth, at least, it feels like this utopia. And when this movie came out in 2009, people became obsessed with it. They could not get enough of it. People were not over it. They were watching it again and again. They were imagining themselves in this world, in Pandora. People started doing literally whatever they could to make their lives like the characters in the movie. So they learned the made-up language from the movie. Or a bunch of people became vegetarians for the sake of emulating these characters. They did stuff even sometimes people started praying to the deity of Pandora, the god on this world. Life-altering decisions, right? They were doing big things. But even with all these changes, with everything that they were doing, for some people, it just wasn't enough. They couldn't get enough. Post-Avatar depression syndrome became this term that was used to coin the phenomenon of seeing the movie and then being completely disenchanted with the world. One fan, he said this. He said, "Ever since I went to see Avatar, I've been depressed. Watching the wonderful world of Pandora and all the Na'vi made me want to be one of them. I can't stop thinking about all the things that happened in the film. I even contemplate suicide, thinking that if I do it, I will be rebirthed in a world similar to Pandora, where everything is the same as in Avatar." See, for some people, Avatar, it wasn't just a story that they loved. It became a reality that they longed for. People desperately wanted this to be true, to be real, and it changed everything about the way that they lived. Everything. And I don't know, I remember hearing that learning about this back in 2009, maybe 2010, when it really started to blow up. And I remember thinking how could that happen to people? How could they be so consumed by a fictional story? How could a story that's not real, why would they make it their whole life? Why would they change? How could a story dictate everything that they did? Didn't make sense. But the more I've thought about it over the years, to be honest, the more I get it. Not the Avatar specifically part, but just how that happens, I think about it, and I think about the fact that stories are powerful. Stories are really, really powerful. A great story, it pulls you in, right? It shows you a life that is compelling, that's really attractive. And it paints a picture of the way you could live, the person you could be. A great story, it creates a reality that then you want to live in, that you want to live out. And that is powerful stuff. It is. Robert McKee, he's an author and he's also a professor at USC. He teaches story writing. And in one of his classes, he said, storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world. Stories. Stories are the most powerful way to put ideas into the world. And here's the thing, guys. Stories are all around us. Like we can't get away from them. They're woven into the fabric of our society. And there's like the obvious ones, right? The stories that we hear in podcasts or read in books or see in movies and TV shows. Like those are the stories we know. But then also there's other stories that are more subtle. There's stories that are really like they're messages. They're narratives that the world is telling us, that we get from the culture that we live in. And they're messages, but really they're still stories because they're still giving us a way to live. They're still telling us about a person that we could be. So, for example, take the love story, okay? So the love story, it says that, hey, as soon as you find your person, then you'll be good, right? You'll be whole. You'll be secure. And that story is like literally everywhere. Like that story is in every commercial we see. Like whether it's jewelry or Uber or whatever it is. It's on dating apps, obviously. It's on TikTok. It's in restaurants. We see it on billboards. We even see it at our family Thanksgiving when our family members ask if we're dating someone again and again, right? Like it's everywhere. We can't get away from it. The love story is everywhere, and it's telling us that we will finally be fulfilled when we have romance. Or the success story, okay? The success story is the story that says the more that you do, the more you are, right? So it's saying your accomplishments are the measure of your worth. And we hear that narrative, like I think we hear it in our classrooms. Like we hear it sometimes from our professors, but we also sometimes hear it from our parents. And I think we often hear it in our jobs. So we hear again and again that this story, this success story that says, the more you do, the more you are. When you achieve, then you matter. Or okay, take another example, the adventure story. This is the story that says, hey, go and have all the experiences, go on all the trips, do all the things, and then you will be happy. In this story, again, we could cite lots of places where we find this, but I think we find it on Instagram a lot, right? When we're scrolling and we look at the celebrities and the friends that we're following, and they are doing all the cool things. They are having way more fun than we are. And that story, it starts to get in our ear, and it's telling us, hey, if you want to be happy, all you gotta do is go experience more. Go experience what other people are doing. See, stories, these kind of stories, these cultural narratives, they have power. They have power. They make us think about the world in a particular way. They give us like a lens for thinking about the world, and it affects us. It does. A different author, his name is Terry Pratchett. He says in one of his books, he said, people think that stories are shaped by people. In fact, it's the other way around. It's the other way around. People don't shape stories. Stories shape people. Stories have the power to shape us and guide us and define us. A compelling story, like a story that we long to be true, that is inevitably going to change the way we live. Like absolutely, it will affect the way we live. And ultimately, the stories that we long for, those are the stories that we're going to live out. So go back to those stories. Like if we long for the love story to be true, then we're always gonna be living for the next relationship, right? Like we're gonna make everything about being with someone, finding our person, but what we probably won't do is ever look at who we are on our own. Or if we long for the success story to be true, then we're always going to be chasing the next accomplishment. We are always going to be trying to prove ourselves through our performance. But we're never going to feel like enough. Or the adventure story, right? We're always going to be looking for the next experience, the next hit, the next thrill that life has to offer us, but we're never just going to enjoy what is in front of us. Never going to do that. See, these stories, they shape us, they affect us. So the story that we are longing for, it has the power to define us. And if that's true, then we really have to ask ourselves, okay, what story am I living for? What story am I longing for? Like, what is the story that I really, really want to be true, that I'm actually maybe putting my trust in? And when we ask that, we have to ask ourselves next, how is that shaping us? How is that defining that story? How is it defining the way that we live? What story are you living for? Because whatever it is, it has the power to define you. Okay, so here's an example, okay? Take Stephen, for example. Who's Stephen? Well, Stephen is a guy in Acts 6, and he shows up as one of the men who is chosen in Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, to take care of widows. If you guys were here last week, you heard Davis talk about this passage, and you heard him mention the way that these disciples were asked to select 7 men. And these 7 men, this was the qualification. They had to be of good reputation. They had to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. Okay, so that's what they're looking for. And as it turns out, these are the qualifiers of this role, and Stephen, he fits that. A couple verses down, it says that he is a man full of faith and the Holy Spirit. He is full of grace and power. So look at this list. Are you catching it? He is full of the Spirit, of wisdom, of faith, of grace, of power, meaning that he's living these things out to the fullest. Like, he is fully embodying these things. They fully define who he is. This is Stephen. This is who he is. And so obviously we want to know, okay, if this is who Stephen is, if this is what defines him, what's the story that's driving this kind of life? Like, what story is he living out of? How does he get here? Okay, to do that, we're going to look at what happens tonight. We're going to look at what happens next to Stephen once he's in this role. Okay, so starting in Acts 6, verse 9, it says, opposition arose, however, from some members of the freedmen's synagogue, composed of both Cyrenians and Alexandrians, and some from the Cilicia, I don't know. I had it and then I didn't. And Asia, and they began to argue with Stephen. Okay, so what's happening here is that if you've been with us, you see opposition. Like, you've known this semester that this isn't like a new thing. We've seen it and again, right? Like, it's just kind of the way things are going. So nothing new here. In chapter 4, we saw 2 of the apostles, and what happens to them is they're arrested, and then they're banned from speaking about Jesus. And then in chapter 5, then all of the apostles are arrested. They're thrown in prison, they're banned again, and they're flogged. So this time, what we're seeing in verse 9 is that there is a group of Jewish people from a particular synagogue, and what they're doing is they're starting to argue with Stephen. And so again, it seems like maybe this is just like par for the course, right? It is just part of the job of an apostle to deal with some opposition. So no worries, right? Maybe this isn't a big deal. But then things take a turn, okay? So picking up in verse 10. But they were unable, these Jewish people from the synagogue, they were unable to stand up against his wisdom and the Spirit by whom he was speaking. Then they secretly persuaded some men to say, we heard him speaking blasphemous words against Moses and God. They stirred up the people, the elders and the scribes, so they came, seized him, and took him to the Sanhedrin. They also presented false witnesses who said, this man never stopped speaking against this holy place and the law. So these people, these men that are arguing with Stephen, they realize that they're like no match for Stephen's wisdom. It turns out they're no match for the Spirit, right? And so they cannot hold up against his teaching, his wise words, like his logic is just too sound. And what he's doing is he's convincing a lot of people to follow Jesus. And so they are frustrated. They realize they cannot do this. And so they decide, we're gonna switch tactics. Instead of attacking his ideas, his opinions, we're gonna attack him. And like, this isn't a new tactic, right? Like, we've seen this a lot. Like, it is a classic maneuver in political campaigns, right? Like, get votes by tearing down the opponent. And so what you have is often, instead of going after debating someone's opinions, their positions, what you do is you destroy their character. And we've seen it, right? Like, it's in those like ominous, dark commercials where this guy has this deep voice and he's like, this guy hates puppies. Like, don't trust him. Like, we've seen those before, and it's just, you don't really know what to do with it, because it's like, well, obviously that's about the person. That's not really what we're talking about, is it? These people in Acts 6, they're doing the same thing. Instead of debating with his ideas, they're destroying his character. And so what they do is they start rumors against Stephen, and they rile people up against him. And then they accuse him of blasphemy. And that word blasphemy, like to blaspheme, it means to speak falsely about God. And like, we might not think that that's like a huge deal here. Like in the States, at least, we don't have laws against what we can or can't say about God. But here in Jerusalem, in this time, it was a crime punished by death. The Sanhedrin, the Jewish rulers of the time, they could, by law, have someone killed for speaking untrue things about God. So now maybe this doesn't feel quite like the opposition that we've seen in previous chapters. Like maybe now Stephen's life is actually at stake. And this is serious. And because it's serious, we might expect that Stephen would actually show like a little bit of anxiety. Like he might show that he is a bit fearful. Like, wouldn't you be? Like, I would be, right? We would be in this circumstance. Like, imagine, like, one day you are debating ideas and opinions in a public setting, and then the next, you are on trial for your life. Like, if I were in that position, I would be really tempted to panic. So how does Stephen respond? As he is standing on trial in front of this council, in front of these rulers, they ask him to defend himself. And you know what he does? He tells a story. He starts in the beginning of chapter 7. He starts telling, he launches into this huge story that spans about 2,000 years of history. It's a long story. And it is the story of his people. It's the story that tells about God rescuing his people, about sending deliverers to again and again, over and over, to the nation of Israel, saving them out of things like oppression and bondage and sin. And what he does is he starts telling the story of the Bible. Over like 50-ish chapters, we're not gonna read it, over 50 chapters, he starts telling the story of the Bible, starting with the promise that God made to Abraham in Genesis 12. And then he reminds these leaders of Joseph, a guy who was sold into slavery by his brothers, but then was protected by God. And then used by God to save his family, his whole family, out of a famine as they move into Egypt. And Stephen says later, as this family grew, well, then they were oppressed in Egypt by the Egyptian Pharaoh. And so what God does is he hears his people's suffering, and he sends Moses to rescue and lead them out of Egypt. And then he talks about Joshua. He talks about the promised land. He talks about David and Solomon and the tabernacle and the temple. And then he finally gets to Jesus, who Stephen calls the righteous one. He says, this is the one who these leaders have rejected and killed. He is the one who came as God himself to rescue his people, to bring them out of sin and into an everlasting kingdom with him. That is the long story that Stephen tells in chapter 7, and it is the story that defines him. Like, this is the story that defines everything about his life. This is who he is, and this is the bigger story. This is the best story. This is the true story of the entire world. It is the one story that says God delivers his people. We have a rescuer. Jesus is the hero who has come to save us, and he has already won. That's the story that Jesus is telling here, and that Stephen is living out of. He's living out of this story. So when we would expect Stephen to be anxious and fearful, instead, Stephen stands there and he is calm, he is confident, and he is committed. See, living into God's bigger story, it allows Stephen to be calm and confident and committed. He's calm, right? Like he's standing there in front of this council and he doesn't get flustered. Like, he doesn't rush to defend himself. No, it's almost like he has Jesus's words playing on repeat in the back of his head. It's almost like he has John 16:33 running on repeat, which says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world, but be courageous. I have conquered the world. So he is calm. He is at peace. He knows that Jesus has suffered too in our place, but he knows that it has won the victory over death forever. He has nothing to worry about. He has nothing to fear. Stephen is calm, but he's also confident. He is confident that Jesus is a rescuer and that nothing can stop the rest of God's story. Like, nothing will stand in the way. And just to pause here, like, Stephen, it's not like he's naive about what could potentially happen to him right now. You know, it's not like he's just like out there riling up the leaders for fun and being like, it's okay, it's fine. Like, Jesus saved, so he's gonna get me out of this one. Watch. Like, that's not his vibe right now. He knows. He knows what could happen because he knows what Jesus told his disciples. In Luke 21, Jesus, before he is killed, he tells his disciples of what will happen before he returns, what it will look like for people to follow Jesus. And it's almost like he is talking directly to Stephen. He says this, but before all these things, before he returns, before Jesus comes again to restore all things, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to bear witness, to make his name known. Therefore, make up your minds not to prepare your defense ahead of time, for I will give you such words and a wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. You will even be betrayed by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends. They will kill some of you. You will be hated by everyone because of my name, but not a hair of your head will be lost. By your endurance, gain your lives. See, this is the story that Stephen is signing up for. That's what he's signing up for. And he's signing up for it because he is confident that Jesus is a rescuer, a redeemer, and he's confident in the end of the story. He knows what is to come. He is calm. He's confident. But finally, he's committed. He's committed because at the end of chapter 7, when Stephen finally finishes his long story and he has explained who Jesus is, what these leaders have done to reject him, they are so enraged that they immediately drag him out of the city and they begin to stone him, which is a brutal, violent process where someone has rocks thrown at them repeatedly until they die. It's awful. But even in that moment, even then, Stephen does not waver. He doesn't. This is the way the last 2 verses of chapter 7 read. While they were stoning Stephen, he called out, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. He knelt down and cried out with a loud voice, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." And after saying this, he fell asleep. That is often the New Testament's way of saying he died. So literally, in this moment, as they are literally hurling stones at him, as he is hit over and over again, like in the moments where he knows that he is going to die, Stephen holds fast. Like he endures in this suffering because he knows where he's headed. Like he is so fixed on it. He's looking to Jesus and he knows that he is going to be with him. That is the end of his story. That's the end of the story. Like that's the end of God's true, bigger story. It's guaranteed. That is the end. And it's what gives Stephen commitment, perseverance in what is the most awful, worst, terrible moment of his entire life, the worst thing he will ever face. That's what gives him commitment. Like, can you imagine that for a second? Like what would this be like? And honestly, like when I'm been asking myself this, I'm like, honestly, maybe no. Like, probably not. I can't quite imagine what this would be like. And that might be true for a lot of us. Like, I don't know if we have potentially faced this kind of fear, that intense of suffering. But we all have hardships, right? Like, we all know what suffering feels like. Maybe it's not persecution. Maybe it's not necessarily this kind of hatred from people. Maybe it is. But maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a different kind of suffering. Maybe it's different, but think about it. Whatever that is for you, think about one of your darkest moments. Like one of your most difficult experiences. One of your scariest seasons of life. And think about the question of, how did I respond? It's a big question. I don't ask that lightly, but ask yourself, was I living in calmness and confidence and commitment? Was I living for the reality of God's bigger story, or was I living out a different story? Was I living in a story that drove me to fear and anxiety and trying to control and avoid and escape that suffering? See, how did I respond? I think that's the question. And then maybe we need to ask ourselves, based off how I responded, what does that tell me about the story that I've been living out? I was living out. I have been living. See, you and I, we are living in the same story, the same exact story that Stephen did. Because you and I are a part of God's bigger story. You are as much a part of God's story as the people that we read about in the Bible. Right? Like your life is in the pages of the Bible because you and I, just like the apostles, just like the early church, just like these people in Acts that we've been reading about for weeks, we know that Jesus is coming back. We know the end of the story. Revelation 22 tells us that he is coming back. He is going to return to restore all things. God's bigger story. That is the story of your life. That is the story of my life, and we know the ending. And that means that no matter what, and I don't say that flippantly, but I mean it, no matter what, that means that we can face it in calmness, in confidence, and commitment. Like we can live that out because that's the power of the Spirit. That's what he does in us. And it means that if you know the end of the story, then you can live through whatever happens in the middle. You can. You are able to in the gospel story. So when you get, a devastating diagnosis that just like rocks your world, that you don't know what to do with, you can actually take a deep breath and walk through it calmly. Because you know that Jesus is with you and that he will heal you either in this life or the next. Or when you lose the person that you just like can't imagine losing in your life, that you don't know how to go on without them, well, you can be confident. You can be confident that Jesus brings life from death and that this is not the end of the story. Or when family members turn away from you, when friends reject you because of things you believe, you can stay committed, remain committed to Jesus, knowing that he will never abandon you. Like he is always, you are united to him forever. You are in God's bigger story, and it brings calmness and confidence and commitment. So put your hope in that story. Like know that story, love that story. Like we gotta actually know this story. We have to spend time in God's story. We have to read its pages. We have to think about how it applies to our life, put ourselves in the pages of the Bible to see what it means for our own lives. We have to let it shape and guide and define us. Place your trust in the true story of the entire world. If you do that, it will change you. It will change everything about you over time, I promise. But you know what it won't do? It will not shield you from suffering. Jesus said it himself, right? Like we will have suffering in this world. That is inevitable. Placing your trust in God's story, it's not gonna take that away. But it will define how you live in the middle of that suffering. It will define how you respond to suffering itself. I've seen that in my own life again and again. Like there have been a couple times in my life where I have just felt like things are really out of control, right? Like maybe you know that feeling where fear and anxiety, they want to take control. And in those moments, it is really, really hard to see clearly, to look at God's bigger story and believe that it is true. But when that happens, I go back and I look at a passage again and again that has always brought me back to the reality that I long for, the reality of God's bigger story, the reality that I know is true. So to end tonight, all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna read this passage to you guys. And what I want you to do, music team, you guys can come back up. What I want you guys to do, you can close your eyes if you want to, you don't have to, but I just want you guys to imagine the thing that is going on in your life that feels too painful, too difficult, too overwhelming, too scary right now. And as I read these words, I want it to just like wash over that thing. Like I want this passage to let it redefine the thing that you're going through. Let it redefine the story that you are living for. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna read this passage and we're just gonna let it sink for a minute. And the thing is, guys, this is truly one of my favorite passages. So I mean it when I think that this passage could have a huge impact in how you see this story. It's from 2 Corinthians 4. It's kind of long, so in the middle I kind of gotta jump from a couple verses. But just listen along and apply it to the thing that you've got going on right now, okay? I'm gonna read. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. We are persecuted, but not abandoned. We are struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry the death of Jesus in our body so that the life of Jesus may also be displayed in our body. For we know that the one who raised the Lord Jesus will also raise us with Jesus and present us with you. Therefore, we do not give up. Even though our outer person is being destroyed, our inner person is being renewed day by day. For our momentary light affliction is producing for us an absolutely incomparable eternal weight of glory. So we do not focus on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Jesus, we thank you for the fact that you are the author of the true story, the bigger story, the story that all of our lives fit within. God, you have made this story known to us. We get to live into this story in freedom, knowing that you have rescued us, knowing that you've written yourself into the story to bring us out of our sin, bring us out of the slavery, the oppression, of our lives and bring us into your kingdom, into your family, into an everlasting joy. Jesus, we thank you. We pray that you would help us know this truth in whatever we face, because you tell us there will be suffering in this world. We know that to be true. We felt it, and yet we also know that you're with us. So just work into our heart the truth that the end of the story is coming, that you are returning, that you are going to restore all things, and that we will be with you. Jesus, we long for that day. We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.